here in a little bit larger swatch. And if you like, you can take a piece of tape. What I like to do is use Post-it notes. If I want a nice clean line here, I put a Post-it note there. Let it touch, and then I can just drag my brush right over the Post-it note, and I've got my yellow across here. I want this color nice and opaque. That's why we're using gouache. Don't want a bunch of see-through paint. And you can see that that yellow is a pretty comfortable mixture between a cool yellow, which will make great greens, and a warm yellow, which will make great oranges. I got a nice middle yellow out of it. And I'm going to be doing that same thing, mixing cool and warm, warm and cool reds. And I'm going to do the same thing with my warm and cool blues across there. And I'm making sure that I'm writing in the perimeter here. Later on, I'm going to go back and print nice, neat letters on there. And what I need to do before I keep moving on is just make sure this paint dries so that I've got my what I call a normal yellow out of a warm yellow and a cool yellow. And I'm proceeding around the color wheel. One thing nice about these Post-it notes, you can just discard them and use another one. They're good on straight lines, don't work on curves. So I'm going to be cleaning this brush for now, and I do have some red squeezed out in my palette. I usually like to use a flat palette, but because I was adding water to my paint, so I'm going to keep using my flat brush, so I'm double washing that brush. I'm making sure that there is no yellow left in that brush because I want to use it for red. And wipe it off and make sure that there's no yellow residue in that. So right now, I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of my vermilion. Now it's coming out of the tube like crazy. And I'm going to take, with a palette knife, it's not necessary that you use a palette knife, but I like it for mixing and blending, even with our water-based paint. Make sure that that is all clean. It's got some residue on it, so I'm going to pick a little bit of water in it. Make sure you don't drag your water over your work surface. Let's see what we got here. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of this warm red and a little bit of this cool red, and I'm going to mix them back and forth until I get what I think is a right-on red for the middle of this composition, middle of these of the red zone here. Let's see if I got enough color on there. Yeah, I think that's going to be good. Wipe off that palette knife. Again, you can use brushes to do that with. And then I've got enough paint on there that I can make what I consider a good red. And to make this go faster, my little stack of Post-it notes will help me. So it doesn't, we used Post-it notes before on one project, or some of you may have used them. These little ones are really great for color wheel work. It makes you look like a really clean worker. But really clean workers use tricks like this and paint that paint over the top. Drag that pigment across the surface with the wet medium and get that painted. Let's see, I might go back for a little more and paint those in. Go back for a little more on my palette there and drag that brush across the surface. The brush will discharge moisture along with the pigment. across the surface so it gets a little dry sometime. And before it dries, always remove those little pieces of Post-it note. There we go. Alrighty. I would say the red tends to be a little less vibrant than I would hope for. Get rid of those pieces, rinse my brush in my red tray, and I can go over to the blue, but I'm not going to do that this evening. So what I want you to know is that in the very thin outer ring of your color wheel for 10A, which is the wet media color wheel, you should be able to place the name of the color in that outer ring. Now, I do it outside to begin with because our paint is opaque, but you'll be writing O for orange, R-O for red-orange. Here you've got your warm and cool versions of red, and with a pigment pen you can go on there. But ahead of time, either within the space or outside the space, you don't need to paint the outer ring with the two examples of warm and cool. That only holds for the split primaries that are here. You'll be painting this next section here, and this will be left blank with the color. So after I get to a red, the next color will be a red violet. Here's my violet. Here's my blue violet. Blue violet. There's my blue. This is blue green. And so if you write in the letters within that narrow outer ring, you'll know that you're not going to paint there. This is green, and this is yellow-green. So I will proceed in filling in the outside of the color wheel, and then the inside, I will have my hues around the outside. I will have the warm and cool versions that make up the hues, the primary hues, and then I will have tints, which is the hue plus white. I'll have tones in the fourth ring, which is a hue plus white plus black, and I'm suggesting that you use a middle gray, because white plus black can mean 90% white and 10% black, which will make the color look very different. And lastly, a hue with black. So those are yet to be painted here. I suggest you not make your color wheel too small so that you can't get your brush into these little tiny areas. If you're having difficulty doing this, you know, hit a stationery supply store, office supply store, get yourself some little sticky notes so that you can keep your edges nice and clean while you work. And you will have a split primary color wheel. Later on, we'll explore what kind of colors can happen when you use a warm yellow, for instance, and attempt to mix it with the cool side of the color wheel. What will happen to that color through experimentation? So this is the color wheel for 10A. It's got lots of parts to it. Take your time, make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you've got your warm and cool versions of your paint,